Hi, I'm Jimmy. In this video, we're going to walk through the top 5G stocks, not just in the US, but around the globe. Our goal is to see if we can identify the best 5G companies, either that are directly related to 5G or indirectly related, that we can buy going into 2020 and beyond. Now, just so we're on the same page, 5G is the 5th generation of wireless networks, and it's expected to be a real game changer. It's supposed to provide speeds over 4G LTE that can range anywhere from 10 times the current speed to 100 times the current speed. They say that when we're connected to a true 5G network, we could download a full high-definition movie in somewhere between 1 and 3 seconds. But 5G does have its limitations. The biggest one comes in the difficulty of setting the whole thing up. So when we think about the 4G network, well, what wireless companies had to do, companies like Verizon or AT&T, what did they have to go when they were setting the whole thing up? Well, essentially, they would set up cell towers, and those cell towers sent out signals. And when we look at the radio wave as an example, the 4G would land somewhere in that area. And usually that's somewhere less than 6 gigahertz. The advantage to that is that when the towers go up, they send out a fairly strong signal. And up to this point, 4G has served us fairly well. But as more and more devices come online, 5G is supposed to be able to handle way more devices way faster. But crucially, the 5G signal operates further down the spectrum. And the advantage to that is that there's way more bandwidth over there, and it should be significantly faster, but it can't travel nearly as far as the lower frequencies can, and it can be blocked easier by large objects like a building. So what providers are forced to do is they're forced to put up way more smaller cells as compared to a broader tower like a 4G network. Now, obviously, this map isn't to scale. I'm simply illustrating how it would work. The point is that where you would just need one cell to cover a certain area, you're going to need significantly more 5G cells, not only to get around the obstructions that could be in the way, but also because the signal doesn't travel as far. So what the very extensive 5G network calls for is a ton of upfront cost, and that's currently what companies like AT&T and Verizon are currently laying out as they're setting up. Now, at the end of the day, they'll be huge long-term beneficiaries of the 5G network. But I do think it's important to point out that a fully scaled 5G network is still many years away. Now, once it's here, wireless companies will be able to take the 5G network that they build and offer a variety of products by slicing the network using software updates. So it's likely to produce a greater return on invested capital compared to something like the 4G network. One of the key advantages to 5G is that it's going to be much more software-based than the hardware-based after the initial setup. The 4G network is much more restrictive in what you can do with it, whereas 5G is going to be much more expansive. I believe it was the CEO of Sprint that described this nicely when he said that 4G was where you could add individual lanes to a highway that could handle a certain number of lanes. 5G is very similar, except it can handle more lanes, and in this case, you can stack multiple highways on top of each other without any issue. So clearly, companies like AT&T and Verizon could be solid long-term beneficiaries from the 5G network. But we should also consider some of the smaller plays. I think of a company like T-Mobile, and I think it's possible that T-Mobile, as it tries to pick up ground in the 5G network, where they can gain ground that perhaps AT&T and Verizon don't initially focus, they could essentially snatch some of their overall market share, and that could help some of the smaller guys grow. So that's another good one. And I've actually got 3 favorites coming up in the end, but these are all ones I think we should consider. Well, we can also look at the supplier space. A company like Corning is a good example. Corning has already signed a supply agreement with Verizon to supply optical fiber, which is necessary to build this type of infrastructure. Now, I'm actually a big fan of Corning in general. I believe that they have a solid business outside of 5G, and what they're doing in 5G should help continue to support their growth overall. But I think at the end of the day, Corning could be a good sort of a side hustle in this whole thing. Another company that's sort of in line with this and somewhat of an underdog because a lot of people are relying on it, and that's Nokia. Now, Nokia is traded in Europe and in the US. And many of us could get involved in Nokia if we want. I believe it's a cheaper stock, a lower cost stock, not cheaper, but a lower cost. And right now they're heavily reliant on the success of 5G, and they're playing a giant role in it. So I think that that's another complementary one to a company like Corning. Okay, but now I've got three favorites that I think could do quite well as 5G continues to come to market. Two come from the emerging markets, and one focuses on the developed markets. But we can buy them all in the US, and they're also traded in other countries around the world. Now, I found these companies. What I was looking for is I was looking for companies that had a potentially strong hold on their piece of the 5G market in their respective areas. The first one is Global Telecom. Global Telecom is a provider of telecom services in the Philippines. Now, what I like about them is they have pretty good growth from a revenue perspective. And as we can see, they're expected to continue growth over the next couple of years, at least according to analyst estimations. Now, on top of that, Global Telecom has a decent balance sheet. They have a relatively strong profit margins compared to most types of companies in this industry. And most importantly, they have limited competition in the 5G space in their home market, which is probably why they have pretty good margins. Okay, next up, we have China Mobile. Now, China Mobile has seen a decent amount of growth over the past couple of years. And once again, they're going to be huge beneficiaries of the emergence of 5G. Now, China Mobile has been spending a ton of money on 5G cells, and they've recently upped the amount of cells, 5G cells, that they expect to put up this year. They upped the target amount. China Mobile has the largest mobile consumer base in the world, and they've been shifting their business from primarily voice to more data-centric. Now, if they're able to scale the 5G network in China, which they seem well positioned to do, well, they're likely to have some solid growth for at least the next few years. Now, you may notice here that I couldn't really find any reliable analyst projections, but overall, it still seems that their growth has been decent so far. Another good sign is that the China Mobile ADR that trades in the US currently pays a dividend yield of about 4.5%. And just so we're on the same page, an ADR is short for American Depository Receipt. And basically, it's when a US bank, a US depository bank, which they represent a certain number of shares, and essentially they list their own listing for the representation of those shares on a US exchange. So when you buy an ADR, you're essentially buying the bank's ownership in the ownership of the company. So ADRs can be an easy way to buy shares of a company or get access to the shares of a company that don't normally trade in our own country. So we can go buy China Mobile on the US market using the ADR, or in Hong Kong, which is their home market. They also trade on a European exchange. I believe they trade in Germany. Either way, there's opportunities to jump in and buy them. Okay, on to the next company, and that's KDDI. KDDI is the second largest telecom company in Japan behind NTT. Now, they have a fairly strong balance sheet, and when we check out their earnings per share, well, we can see that they've had some decent growth. But what I like most about KDDI is that they seem to be bringing their business right in line with what 5G brings to the table. They've recently started offering Netflix to their customers, just as an example. I think this is a good sign for them and probably Netflix as well, but we'll get into that in another video. Then, what they've done to help achieve their goal is to try to blend both 4G and 5G as they try to expand their 5G network. Now, I actually think that Japan is well suited geographically for 5G expansion, since it's a smaller country than a country like the US or China. Plus, they're already moving in the direction of getting many of their 53 million or so subscribers. Plus, I believe they have another 39 million homes and business subscribers that could all use an upgrade towards the 5G network. So, in the long run, I wouldn't be surprised if KDDI did quite well as 5G continues to develop. But what do you think? I know I listed a lot of companies in this video, and I have a few favorites, and a lot of that is revolved around, I think that they're going to offer some more growth opportunities than perhaps the bit more debt-ridden AT&T and Verizon in the US. As 5G continues to grow, I would expect many, if not all of these companies to do quite well, or at least to benefit from the 5G expansion. But what do you think? Please let me know what you think in the comments below. If you haven't done so yet, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up. Thank you so much for sticking with me all the way to the end of the video. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.